This show is intended for general purposes only, as individual situations may vary. Statements made should not be relied upon as recommendations or solicitation. When discussed, past performance is no guarantee or indication of future results. Nelson Financial Planning offers securities through Nelson Ivest Brokerage Services, member FINRA, and SIPC.
Good Sunday morning. This is Bud Hettinger. Next on News Radio 93.1 WFLA, the longest-running radio show in Central Florida, Dollars and Cents, with my good friend Joel Garris from Nelson Financial Planning. You can call him at the office this week at 407-629-6477 to schedule your free consultation to discuss your retirement plans, or you can talk to him right now at 407-916-5400.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the program Dollars and Cents. My name is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, and on the program today we have a variety of things to talk about. We'll hit the article we posted on the various social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and etc., about Social Security and 3 great reasons to take Social Security benefits at 62. We seem to be one of the lone voices in the internet wilderness and the media wilderness that actually advocates taking Social Security early. You see all these reports that say delay, 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 but there are some very validly reasons to take it early. Not saying that's applicable for everybody by any stretch of the imagination, but I think more often than not, if you can take it and not give it back, well then, meaning give it back because you're working still and not quite your full retirement age, well then it certainly makes sense. So I want to touch upon that article we posted on the various social media networks. It's an article courtesy of a Selena Marjan. 3 great reasons to take Social Security benefits at 62. We will talk about that on the program today. And then we've got to get to this. I don't know if you saw it, but the folks in Washington are up to it again in terms of making changes in the law, particularly as it relates to your retirement accounts. And folks, this one appears like it's going to happen. The bill is called the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. But, Mark, those guys, and I'm trying to decide whether they are politicians or marketeurs, because only a marketer would come up with that kind of a title for a piece of legislation. Let me read that one again. Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. Oh, it's a great acronym. It's the Secure Act, right? So don't you want to be secure? It passed the House 417-3. So that's pretty bipartisan. So you may want to listen up to some of the changes that are in there. As with anything that comes out of Washington, some are good, some are bad, some people win, some people lose. We'll go over all of that here on the program today. This Secure Act, as it is known, given that it passed by a vote of 417-3 in the House, I think it's pretty safe to assume that not too long from now it will be the law of the land. There are some good points to it. There are some bad points to it. I am troubled by the bad points, but we'll start with the good, because last week on the program it was pretty much the things that bug Joel. So I want to shift gears and come out of the gate with positive information, positivity, which is really hard to do when you talk about what's going on in Washington. But here are some very positive changes that could very well be the law in the short term. Number one, it repeals the ability to make contributions to over the age of 70 and a half. Let me say that again, because I don't think I said that very clearly. Right now, if you're over the age of 70 and a half, you cannot make a contribution to a traditional IRA. Remember, you can only contribute to a retirement account if you are working, if you are having some level of earned income. So in the past, once you turn age 70 and a half, the required minimum distribution rules kicked in. And so then you had to start to take money out based upon your life expectancy. And you were not allowed to make new contributions into an IRA. The bill repeals that. It basically says that if you are still working and you at any age, no matter what, you can make a contribution to a traditional IRA. So that's good. That's very good. It also increases the age to start taking those required minimum distributions up from 70 and a half to age 72. Another good thing. Okay, both of those are good things. The ability, if you're still working over the age of 70 and a half and you want to say put aside something on a tax-deferred basis, on a tax-deductible basis, then certainly being able to do that in a traditional IRA, why not? Why shouldn't you be able to do that? And the Secure Act recognizes that, yes, in fact, we're going to let you do that. It also shifts the required minimum distribution age up to 72. So that's also a good thing. It delays for another year and a half the time period where you must start taking money out of your IRA. Now, there is obviously a cost to that. There is a cost to that, to allowing people to put more money in their retirement accounts and take a tax deduction today. There's also a cost to that, to delaying when people must take money out of their retirement accounts and start to pay taxes. Remember, the required minimum distribution is a way that the government ensures that you're going to start taking money out of an account whose proceeds have never been taxed. And when you take that money out, then that money becomes taxed. That's the concept of the required minimum distribution in the first place. So if they are allowing you to make contributions, or if they are pushing off the age with which you have to make that required minimum distribution, then there has to be a trade-off. And the trade-off is, in fact, the worst possible piece of this legislation. And at the end of the day, really does surprise me how it was able to pass the House 417-3, and yet this provision is in it. And the provision that's in it that you need to be very aware of and pay very close attention to, because it fundamentally affects how you prepare to take income in retirement, where you take income in retirement, and most importantly, what happens after you're gone. Because what this legislation does is effectively it kills the stretch IRA concept. Let me say that again. This legislation, to offset the loss of revenue that comes from being able to let people make more contributions to their IRAs at older ages, to delay having to take the required minimum distribution until age 72. There's a cost to that. There's a revenue loss to that. So they have to offset that. And they've offset that by putting a knife into the stretch IRA concept. This is big. This is very big. And we'll get into the details with it when we get back after these messages here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
This is Bud Hedinger. You know, you can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dollars and Cents here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning talking about the latest legislation out of Washington entitled the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. Okay, nice. Okay, but it's a great acronym. Secure. It's the Secure Act. How could you argue with something that is called the Secure Act, right? I mean, you might as well call it Nice Fuzzy Comfort Blanket Act. Okay, you can't argue with that, something called the Secure Act. And certainly when you see the House pass it by 417 votes to 3, my goodness, it's amazing. I didn't think any of those folks could actually get on the same page of anything. But they've clearly gotten on the same page here, which to us is a pretty significant sign that we may very well see this become the law of the land. There are positives, there are negatives. The positive, your RMD age gets delayed until 72. And if you are over 70 and a half and still working, you can make contributions in a tax-deductible format to a retirement account. That is cool. Now, here's how they're paying for it. They are taking a big, giant knife and stabbing to death the concept of the stretch IRA. That change alone is expected to generate $16 billion in additional revenue for the government over the next decade. I think that's a low number. Here's why. Understand the concept of the stretch IRA. I inherit an IRA. I get to spread out the distribution of that IRA over the course of the rest of my lifetime. Those are the rules as they exist today. That's why it's called the stretch IRA, because it stretches out over the course of my lifetime as the beneficiary of a retirement account. A very, very powerful planning tool to be used when you're talking about inheriting assets and what kind of assets are better to be inherited in terms of being able to allow those assets to continue to grow on a tax-deferred basis for the rest of a beneficiary's lifetime. Yes, they do have to take out some distributions along the way each and every year, but imagine the power of time and compounding and tax deferral on that money. It's a huge value to the next generation. And here we have the generation that is gradually passing away. See, the World War II generation, that generation that is well into their, or close to their 90s plus, didn't really have IRAs because they all worked for the same employer for 30-odd years and got a pension, and that was just how that generation operated. The next generation, the baby boom generation, really is the first generation that has had to fund their own retirement or their own pensions on their own as a result of the explosion of 401ks and the virtual elimination of your traditional pension plan. So a lot of folks in that baby boom generation that's in their 60s and 70s today, that is the first generation that really has substantial retirement assets. So we haven't really seen retirement assets pass from one generation to the next until now. And it's just beginning. And what's interesting is, obviously, the folks in Washington know that. And so they are eliminating the provision of the stretch IRA. They expect that change to generate about $16 billion in additional tax revenue for the government. I suspect that number is going to be incredibly, incredibly low in comparison to what the numbers actually will be, because we have not seen that massive shift from one generation to the next of retirement assets like we will see over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. That is significant, and that affects you directly. That affects you as the owner of that retirement account. That affects you as the potential beneficiary of a retirement account. Now, not to say that they make you take it out all at one shot. They don't. They're giving you 10 years in which to be able to do that. But that still is a pretty accelerated time frame versus being able to spread it out over a 25 or 30 or 40-year time period. That's pretty significant because 10 years is much, much shorter. And as you might well expect, will generate much more in tax revenue. Say you inherit a $500,000 IRA. You now have to take out $50,000 per year. That $50,000 is enough that it's probably going to push you into a different tax bracket. You're going to pay a higher rate of tax on that required distribution that comes about because of the fact that you've got to take all of this money out within a 10-year period of time. In contrast to the current environment where the stretch IRA, you inherit a $500,000 IRA, you may only have to take out 3 or 4% of that. So that's $15,000 or $20,000. And at the end of the day, if it's invested the way that it should be in some kind of a balance, maybe a growth in income portfolio, it's over time probably making 7, 8, 9%, and at least based upon the 80-year historical data of the market. And if you're only spending 3 or 4, guess what? Ultimately, the balance on that account is going to continue to grow on a tax-deferred basis. The power of that is enormous. But now, if you got to take it out over 10 years, you don't get that. You don't get that. And so the amount of taxes that you're going to pay on this, on inheriting an IRA, just went through the roof. Their estimate of how much additional tax revenue it's going to generate, I think, is a low ball number. It's going to be a whole lot more. That is incredibly significant and really has a tremendous ripple effect in terms of what assets you access in retirement, what your overall estate plan should look like. I mean, it really does require you to then sit down and say, okay, what does it look like for my beneficiaries in terms of that tax picture, and what's the best way to prepare not just for the rest of my life, but to also address the rest of theirs? Because the reality is, if you're like most people, you don't want to see your hard-earned dollars just evaporate to taxes. So it becomes imperative to look at taking money out of a retirement account, maybe more so now than what you might have done in the past, in order to be able to have the ability for the next generation to not have as big a tax bite as possible. It also brings the Roth more into perspective as an option, because then that tax issue really disappears. And as an aside, the government would like nothing more than for you to convert your IRA to a Roth, because that means you just prepaid all of the taxes for not just you, but for the next generation. So I'm not by any stretch of the imagination advocating that. I don't think that's the response that one should have to the death of the stretch IRA. But the reality is that because that IRA is only going to be able to be allowed to be stretched out over the 10-year period of time, I think there's some real planning opportunities that you need to be aware of to really sit down and go through the details of what that looks like and how that plays out. That is a significant change that will have a ripple effect much greater than folks appreciate, simply because we have not seen that massive transfer of IRA assets like we are going to see over the course of the next 15, 20 years. There's more in this Secure Act that passed the House. We'll hit some of the highlights in the next segment, and then we want to shift gears to talk a little bit about Social Security as well here on the program. This is Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
This is Bud Hedinger. You know, you can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Hey, welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. We're going over the details on the Secure Act that passed the House recently by a vote of 417 to 3. It certainly appears that is well on its way to being the law of the land. And at the end of the day, a lot of provisions in it. We've certainly spent some time talking about the biggest changes that are going to have a direct effect in the first half of the program. There's some various other provisions as well that we wanted to just share with you for your continuing education. And it is, again, good news, bad news. So we'll hit the good news first. If you have a 529 savings plan, you'll be able to withdraw as much as $10,000 from a 529 savings plan to repay student loans. So that's a good thing. Gives another flexibility in terms of the 529s and allows for a way to perhaps pay off some student loans at a faster clip because you're going to be able to take money out of your 529 account, assuming that there's money left over after college. Not sure that there would be. Otherwise, why would you have a loan? So that's just kind of a weird provision because I've got a 529. I can take money out to pay off a student loan. Why did I take the student loan in the first place if I still have a balance in the 529? That's just kind of a weird one, but okay, fine, whatever. In terms of accessibility to 401ks and the like, the legislation does expands that in such a way that if you are a long-tenured part-time employee, for example, you would be allowed to participate in a 401k. If you are participating in a 401k, you could, in fact, take distributions out without penalty. They're going to have another penalty-free exception of up to $5,000 a year within a year of the birth or adoption of a child to cover associated expenses. So they're looking at expanding the list of penalty-free distribution options available in 401ks or IRAs. They also are looking to allow folks or employers to sort of group together and offer a 401k type plan if they choose. So again, better accessibility and ability of employers to sort of group plan it together. And then also to show you sort of what those numbers would be that you would potentially be getting in terms of income in retirement off of your 401k balance. And now here's where it starts to kind of skew on the negative side of things, because anytime you're taking a lump sum balance, which is what your 401k would be, and you're trying to convert it to a monthly income amount, that all sounds all fine and dandy, but there's a tremendous amount of assumptions that go in behind that calculation. What's the investment mix look like? What's the expected rate of return look like? All of that then goes into the formulas to calculate that monthly benefit. So if your 401k statements start showing up as, hey, here's how much of a monthly income you could expect off of your 401k balance, the concern that I have there, as with most online calculators, is that they have a tendency to be incredibly conservative in terms of those calculations. So you may find it to be very frustrating to look at your 401k statement, think you've got a decent sum of money in there, and yet the statement is showing that you're going to get a very small amount of monthly income off of that simply because the assumptions and the calculations behind that number are very, very conservative in nature. Now, the good news is that will perhaps spur you to save even more. The bad news is that maybe you don't need to. And I understand that that's the minority, that is for sure. But be careful with the information that you get on any statement or any online calculator, because there's a tendency of all of those calculations, particularly one that's going to be provided to you by your employer, that to make them as conservative as possible so as to not breed false expectations. The problem is that if you're setting up something to not breed false expectations, you're not really setting it up to breed realistic expectations, because you're always going to be shifting it to be much more on the conservative side of things, especially if it's coming from your employer, because there's no way that your employer is going to stick their neck out on it and be overly optimistic on those projections. So I'm not a little concerned about how this monthly income number is going to appear and what the effect of it is going to be. Perhaps it will spur people to save more, but hopefully it doesn't cause people to just throw up their hands and say, forget it, or in fact, delay retirement more than they really need to, because they look at the number and it doesn't look like it's going to be able to generate the same level of income. I think the role of having direct advice is going to be a bigger and bigger item, rather than just simply having the computer tell you what the number is going to be. Now, that may be a little bit of a self-serving commentary, seeing how we are in the financial planning business, but the more I see these numbers and the more I see these calculators and see the background assumptions to them, the more I feel that way. Now we're going to shift to the sort of the real negative here, and I think this is a very unfortunate development with this legislation. The insurance lobby has clearly had a hand in the development of this legislation. They have had their hand in the middle of that. Their lobbyists have obviously done a very good job, because a lot of this act has to deal with making sure that annuities are available in 401ks. I've got a little bit of a problem with that. If you've listened to the show really at all over the course of the past 30-odd years, our opinion on this one has not changed. Annuities are some of the most complicated, most misunderstood, most expensive, highest commission product on the planet. And now here we are having this legislation making annuities a much more part of the 401k universe. I applaud the insurance lobby in Washington. Clearly those guys, whatever all these insurance companies are paying their lobbyists, they just flat out need to double it, okay? Because they've done a fantastic job at getting into this and getting into this Secure Act and ultimately being able to have 401ks be offering or be more likely to push or provide an annuity as an option, which goes directly in, dovetails directly into that whole monthly income thing, right? Because after all, an annuity, a traditional annuity is I take a lump sum of money, I convert it to an income stream of a set amount per month that will last me for the rest of my life. That's all fine and good, okay, but usually that means that the internal rate of return on it is, in fact, very, very low. Don't let anybody fool you by telling you you're going to get a certain percentage back, when that's most of those percentage calculations on the payout of an annuity. When they talk about the rate of return, what they're doing is they're including in the amount of money that you started with. Well, friends, when you calculate a rate of return, you cannot count the money that you put in. That is your principal contribution. That has nothing to do with your earnings. Earnings is the profit that you make on that. not simply getting back the money that you put in. So I'm a little troubled, very troubled, by the push to the annuity side of things with this Secure Act that I suspect may very well become the law of the land in the not-too-distant future. We will shift gears when we get back and talk about Social Security and things to consider when you're taking it at an earlier age than your full retirement age. We'll do that when we get back here on Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
This is Bud Hedinger. You know, you can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Hey, welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dollars and Cents here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. The first half of the, well, actually, I want an extra segment on that. The first three quarters of the program, which I did not intend to do. I planned to, in my head, I was thinking it'd only take about half the program, dealt with the Secure Act that recently passed the House by a vote of 417-3, highly likely to be the law of the land. It's got some good, it's got some bad. In raising the required minimum distribution age to 72, that's good. The bad is the elimination of the stretch IRA. The good, perhaps, is that more employees are going to have access to 401ks by allowing employers to group together to provide 401ks. The bad is the insurance lobby, and their thumbprint on this is all over the place with a push towards describing and providing a monthly income amount on 401k statements, along with making annuities more available, more accessible as options to 401k balances. Good job to the insurance lobby for that. I'm not sure that is something that is really in the best interest, though, of the investing public. If the insurance lobby won out, I assure you that as an investor, that's not in your best interest. We went into a lot of details in the first three quarters of the program. So if you are curious about it, certainly take a listen to the program. We'll be posting it on Facebook, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio. I mean, you name it, we're out there. Google Play, iTunes, all of the program gets converted to a podcast that we put out there on the various platforms. So you're certainly welcome to listen in on it for the future. And listen to some of the details that we covered in terms of those big changes that are happening up in Washington as it relates to your retirement. So we also recently on our social media channels posted an article entitled 3 Great Reasons to Take Social Security Benefits at Age 62. We seem to be in the minority out there in the media that has this view, because you hear all the time to maximize your Social Security, wait. The problem with waiting is that your break even isn't until you're well past your 80s, and in some cases up to your 90s, depending upon how long you waited. Of course, the reality is that what we know about retirement is people have a tendency to spend more early on. If you stop and think about it, that's when you're younger, that's when you're able to do more stuff, and frankly, you need more income. So we thought this article was kind of interesting because it did sort of point out some of those things that we've been talking about for quite some time in terms of this debate on taking Social Security early versus waiting. Now, remember, if you're not your full retirement age, one of the first questions you have to ask when it comes to taking Social Security is, am I still working? And if you are still working, you probably want to not take Social Security, unless you're only working on a part-time basis, making under around $17,000. If that's the case, then you're still fine. You can take it and not have to pay it back. But if you're still working in your regular job and making $40, $50, $60, $75, whatever, $1,000 a year, then, yeah, you probably don't want to take Social Security early. because you're just going to have to wind up giving it back. So you don't want to do that. However, if that's not the case, then certainly taking it early makes sense. At the end of the day, it might not be worth the delay. That's the whole, well, I get a lot more money if I wait. That's true. But I also give up a lot of money between now and then while I am waiting. And when you run the math on that, it usually means that the break-even age is around 78 or 80. That's a long time to wait to be made whole on it, which really gets to the bottom line of, is it really worth delaying it to simply recoup when I am much, much older? The other point of it is perhaps you just can't wait. Maybe your job situation changed. Maybe your health changed. And it just doesn't make any sense to wait in those situations. The reality is that if you retire, understand that you've got to get your retirement income from somewhere. So if you're delaying Social Security with the notion of, oh, I'm going to let that build up, well, where are you going to get those equivalent dollars of income? You're going to take them from your investments? You're going to take them from your 401k? You're going to take them from those assets that you've saved all of those years? I would submit that that's not the best strategy, simply because that's going to make you take a much higher level of withdrawal on your assets early on in your retirement. And at the end of the day, that is a risky maneuver by taking a higher level of income on your retirement assets in the first few years of retirement. If something goes off in the market, then that's going to have a much more dramatic impact because you're taking a higher amount of money out of your assets early on in your retirement. The reality is, if you're retired, you've got to get your retirement income from somewhere, right? So it doesn't make sense in the majority of cases to delay on the Social Security, letting that build up, if you're just going to be hitting your underlying assets at a higher rate. The income's got to come from somewhere. It's not an either or. It's a full picture analysis whereby you've got to be taking and getting that income from somewhere. If you're hitting your assets higher while you're waiting for your Social Security to build up, you may find that you have overworked your assets. And the worst possible time to overwork your assets in retirement is early in retirement, because that's when it can have the greatest damage, because retirement is a long period of time. And you don't want to start right out of the gate by taking a higher level of income from those assets. We've done a bunch of projections on this, on a bunch of spreadsheets, and it is dramatic how important it is to have a low withdrawal rate on your assets early in retirement. The lower you can have that withdrawal rate on your assets when you start retirement, the better off you're going to be and the more successful of a retirement you're going to have. So the money's got to come from somewhere. Social Security, pretty obvious choice to get the money from there rather than hitting your assets at a much higher level. And then, of course, is simply the notion of when you're in your 60s, you ultimately have the ability or the propensity to spend more money on a regular basis, right? Because if I'm in my 60s and 70s, chances are I'm more active, I'm more healthy than if I'm in my 80s and 90s. That's the reality, and that's why enjoying more income might very well make the most amount of sense. So before you completely believe the vast majority of the media out there that says delay, 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 consider those things. The reality is the income's got to come from somewhere, and if you're retired, perhaps it doesn't make sense to wait and just hit the assets at a higher level. You may also have some health issues and some other things to consider, which would say I'm going to take it earlier, along with the fact that delaying it may not actually be worth it, especially when the break-even doesn't come around until you're 80. That seems a long time to wait to break even on the payout of Social Security. So some things to think about on Social Security as well. Covered a lot of territory on the program. Hopefully you all enjoyed and found it informative. Certainly the death of the stretch IRA is a game changer as it relates to your retirement income planning, and your estate planning as well. So we will keep you posted on the future of that. We suspect that that's going to become the law of the land in the near distant future, and we will, of course, keep you up to speed on all of that. In the meantime, we will wrap it up and get on out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day. This has been Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
This is Bud Hettinger, and you've been listening to Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. If you missed any part of today's show or want to listen to it again, check out the radio show at www.nelsonfinancialplanning.com or connect with them on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to call Joel this week at 407-629-6477 to schedule your free consultation to discuss your retirement plan.